The Special Investigating Unit has submitted its report on its findings in the investigation into COVID-19 PPE corruption to President Cyril Ramaphosa. The unit was investigating 5,467 contracts awarded to 3,066 service providers with a total value of 14.3 billion rand. The unit has also retrieved more than 34.2 million rand in assets and cash, and chasing a further 551 million rand in potential cash and assets. A supplementary report will be submitted to the President in June on a further 476 service providers linked to 964 contracts valued at more than 961 million rand, which the unit is still investigating. For more on this, we're joined by former NPA Asset Forfeiture Unit head Willie Hofmeyr. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. Welcome to Newzroom Afrika. A lot of numbers, a lot of chunky numbers as the investigation continue, and some leeway into what is being put under the scope within the work of the SIU. What's your take on the work that's been done so far and what lies ahead?
Well, I think the work that the SIU has done so far has been really, really exemplary, particularly given the massive scale of cases that need to be investigated. So I do suspect that there's probably more to come, though.
And looking at the numbers, I mean, the SIU is still investigating 476 service providers linked to about 964 contracts valued at 961 million rand, and there's still a lot more in counting. What does it speak to when it comes to what the SIU is dealing with, the nature of corruption and how it just continues to balloon?
I think that the investigation really does give us a much better picture of the scale of corruption in South Africa. And I do think it's something that should make us very, very worried here. So, for me, there's two big things we need to look at. The one is, how do we combat corruption better? And secondly, how can we prevent corruption from happening in the first place better?
And what are the challenges in trying to find ways to combat and prevent corruption, especially when it comes to the large chunks of money that are moving? Indeed.
So I think the SIU has done some excellent work in this investigation. But, the challenge for me is that, the problem with the SIU, and I was the head in the past, is that it cannot actually institute the criminal cases. It can recover the money from those people who benefited unduly, and it does that by going to a special tribunal that has been set up to support the work of the SIU. But the problem is, almost all these cases, there should be a criminal investigation and criminal charges to be brought. And, for me, that is a bit of a gap in our system at the moment, is that all the good work done by the SIU is now to be repeated by the National Prosecuting Authority and the Hawks to do a proper criminal investigation. And for me, that's a bit of a waste of resources. And what are the loopholes, especially looking at the National Prosecuting Authority and the Hawks, in following through? I mean, it's, as you make mention of, one thing to do excellent work in the investigation process and then not have the people who are earmarked being held accountable. Indeed, and, I think we also have to remember that both NPA and the Hawks were subject to state capture quite considerably over the last 8 or 10 years. So I think there are also challenges in those bodies for I've got a lot of faith in Shamila Batoy at the NPA and General Labia at the Hawks. But the problem is quite a lot of people were appointed into those bodies for bad reasons over the last period. And so I don't think they always know who they can trust in their organization. And I think the level of skill and expertise has really suffered because a lot of the good people have left those institutions due to the problems that they encountered and the victimization they encountered when they tried to do their jobs properly during the state capture period.
How then can it be ensured that should people be found to have acted in a criminal manner within these contracts and the processes and the procurement processes that needed to be followed but were clearly not followed, how do they become registered within the system so that they don't just move out or resign from the companies and not undergo the necessary disciplinary hearings for them not to land back in the system with a new company, new name? It really speaks to some of the mechanisms that need to be in place when it comes to certain individuals who have been found to be perpetrators.
Indeed, and I think one of the suggestions that I think we must think about seriously was the resolution at the ANC conference that we should set up a single anti-corruption agency that deals with all cases of corruption. And for me, that is a very good suggestion, and I think it's very important, because the reality, let's say, for the NPA and the Hawks is that they've got masses of normal crime to deal with, murders, rapes, other things that really outrage the public and where they demand instant or quick action to be taken. So somehow, dealing with corruption isn't the sole mandate of those organizations. And that's why I think setting up an anti-corruption agency that will, as proposed, that will focus only on corruption and not have to deal with all the other crimes that impact people in this country so badly.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, especially considering that the SIU has already said that they foresee a situation where they could be running out of funds in a few years, and speaking at the moment in conversation with National Treasury and just informing the President that the funds are running low. I mean, that speaks to something really serious when it comes to dealing with matters like this.
It does indeed, but I do think that there's a persuasive argument to be made to Treasury that a lot more money can be recovered if there is better capacity in law enforcement. So I think putting some more money and investment into strengthening law enforcement, for me, is a no-brainer. You can actually get back a lot more money than it's going to cost you. So I do think that we need to intensify our efforts on that front.
Very well. And really, lastly, before we let you go, what do you imagine to be some of the really urgent and pressing challenges that are standing in the middle of corruption when it comes to processes, when it comes to political interference and the nature of the SOEs in South Africa?
Yeah, I think those are a number of challenges. And I think for me, one of the big challenges is that law enforcement was hollowed out to a significant degree in the state capture period. And quite a lot of the good people basically left the state in disgust. So I think it is important that we need to get back some of those skills into the state. I think Hermie and Cronje started doing that at the investigating directorate. But we really need much more investigative and prosecution capacity if we're going to deal with all of this effectively. And that's going to cost money. But I think it is a very important investment in the future of our country.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time. Former NPA Asset Forfeiture Unit head Willie Hofmeyr speaking there about some of the challenges when it comes to the SIU's investigations and, of course, looking and unveiling the work that still lies ahead and the monies that still need to be accounted for.